The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome back if you've been with us for the last installments of this webinar series. My name is Stefan, and I have the honor to host three of the most knowledgeable people in this company. We're going to talk about using commerce, marketing, and service together to create one integrated experience. Real quick, I want to thank all of you for joining us today, investing time into learning Salesforce. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to watch this webinar or the recording. If you're watching the recording, you guys are awesome. And let me tell you, we're going to try very hard to make this the best hour in the day for you. And before we dive into the content, let me introduce you to the fantastic speakers for the whole series. We're going to have Mihir Panchal, who leads our Salesforce cross-cloud practice, but is also a well-known ambassador to our customers and the internal success team. We had Abraham Lloyd, who's a long-standing Commerce Cloud veteran and thought leader on cross-cloud. And today we also have Derek Ellis, who is absolutely the product expert when it comes to Marketing Cloud Connect. And there's Sanjay Bansal, who is responsible for the global cross-cloud alliances. So if you are a Salesforce partner, you want absolutely to get connected to Sanjay. He's going to be scaling cross-cloud for partners across the ecosystem. And lastly, myself, I can help you if you're a partner in the EMEA region and you're looking for enablement on marketing and commerce. Now, we need just a couple of more minutes. I want just to talk about a couple of logistics here. So having a look at the agenda, this is today, unfortunately, is going to be the last time that you're going to be meeting us for this webinar series. On April 24th, we've discussed delivering integrated B2C experiences. We gave you an overview of how exactly the stuff looks like. We've been discussing discovery and integration options. Right on the day after that, we deep dive into data strategy. On Tuesday this week, we were covering the connectors. And today we're going to talk about customer segmentation, top challenges, customer journey engagement, and engagement models. And I'm going to have Mihir talk about all the details, obviously, once we kick this off. If you have questions, what I would like to remind you of is that GoToWebinar has a button to raise a question, and we're going to be covering all of your questions at certain points within this presentation. You can also talk to us via partner community. There's a group which is called Official Cross-Cloud B2C Experts that you can absolutely join. And this is also where you will find the recordings of the sessions, of the past 3 sessions, and including the one from today. If you are an internal Salesforce employee, we're going to have all of those sessions uploaded to Org62. Now, one very last thing, and Mihir also just brought up this slide. I know you all love this. We need to talk about forward-looking statements. You can imagine that the speakers in this webinar series are all fired up and want to get you as excited as they are about Salesforce products and capabilities. With that, please keep in mind that from time to time, we're going to get carried away a little bit and use forward-looking statements. Now, do make sure to make buying decisions only on products and capabilities that are available today. And with that, I would like to finally hand over to Mihir.
Awesome, thank you. All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Would like to, again, just do a quick reminder on what the cross-cloud program is at Salesforce. It's really something that we started this year and late last year. The goal of this program is really to help partners and customers. What are the best practices and how we put together Commerce Cloud, Marketing Cloud, and Service Cloud or core Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Community, etc. Because what we've seen is, there's challenges today that exist when it comes to integrating these clouds. So our goal is to really help reduce that friction, answer questions, be the guide. We can, get more information if there are certain challenges, etc. And then really, ultimately, what we want to do is pave the way for the future of the integrated customer experience within Salesforce. So we've got some products that have been announced that are coming up later this year. How do we actually then help transition customers, make sure you're enabled so that you can then transition to those, transition your customers to that experiences as well for Salesforce. So that's really kind of the goal of the program. And this series is really meant to drive some of the enablement of what solutions exist today and how they would work together. And then as we evolve over the course of the year, we'll do other sessions where it will be around the future pieces as well. So today's session is really thinking through kind of the segmentation engagement models. You know, as Stefan alluded to, we've covered the basics of kind of the data strategy, what are the different ways we can connect the clouds together, and then, you know, how would you actually do it through the connectors and etc. And today is really meant to kind of cover, now that you've connected all the clouds, you know, obviously you want to take care of certain use cases that we covered in the last webinar, but then ultimately from an engagement perspective, really you want to use that as a way to segment all of this together and engage your customers, right? Or having your customers be able to engage their own end consumers. So things we're going to cover today is kind of the different ways you can segment using the Salesforce platform. There's lots of options. I'm sure you know about them. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of those. We're going to explain some of the engagement models and how would you do some of those things? What are some of the best practices around it or things to consider? And then really looking at an example of kind of DMP, Commerce Cloud, and Marketing Cloud with the platform. And then same way, actually, we're going to cover a little bit more around Interaction Studio. So that's kind of the agenda for the day today. As we said before, don't forget to ask questions. Just because we went long last webinar, the way we're going to approach it this webinar is we're actually going to break in the middle and take a bunch of questions and then continue for the rest of the presentation. And this way, we're actually breaking up, making it a little bit more engaging in terms of the questions and responses we can give you as well. So please ask questions. The second item is there will be a survey that will be sent out. Please let us know the feedback. It's really important that we evolve and change this content. We've done so already from the last time we did the webinars, and you know we would like to continue to do the same for the rest of the year. So let's start with segmentation. Ultimately, as I briefly mentioned earlier, right, the reason why we do segmentation and we're connecting all of these clouds, other than getting the one customer view, the whole point of getting the one customer view is so that we can start to engage those customers, segment those customers, and personalize all the content that we give them and provide a much better service, right? That's kind of the key reasons why we're doing what we're doing. And really, when you think about segmentation specifically, we think about it from the perspective of two kind of key areas or key groupings. Membership, where you're essentially part of a certain category because you have birthdays in May, or you have you like certain kinds of shoes or something like that allows you to be part of that specific group. The second on the right is around the intent. So how do we actually engage you based on your intent of doing something? So this becomes a lot more personalized, a lot more one-to-one, and using some of the new capabilities that we have within the platform to drive that really personalized engagement through Marketing Cloud, as well as through commerce, etc. And when we dive a little bit deeper into it, what does that really mean, right? So some examples, as I mentioned, birthdays within 30 days, loyalty program tiers, specific type of shopper on the membership side. And it's really on the intent side is leveraging really the rules and answering kind of those data questions on what is the content I should really be seeing so that I can be engaged based on what I like? What is the loyalty program tier that I really qualify for? And what else I can do to drive to that specific category? And those kinds of questions is what we're answering through that segmentation to drive engagement based on that. So in this diagram, if you think about on the left, you've got kind of this concept of the engagement model maturity, right? We start off at promotional messagings, and as we go up, the maturity of the engagement actually increases in terms of how we're doing it, right? So as you think about from a complexity perspective, really promotional obviously is, could be something like batch and blast or a little bit of small tweaks in personalization. It's really the lowest complexity. And then as we get up to next best actions and things like that, you're really getting into very complex sets of use cases. And then the segment size that you look about here is really around the total number of end consumers you're really engaging, right? It's going to change based on the types of engagement model that you pick. The also other area from an impact perspective is that this is going to be the lowest impact from, you know, how much return you're going to get from a given message, right? Whereas the idea is that with the next best actions and something that's more personalized, you're going to have a lot more impact in terms of the engagement, and it's a lot more value driven in terms of what you do with it. So that's kind of the curve that you can see in terms of what that complexity could look like. As we said earlier, right, just to focus on as just one more time, right, it's really you're focused around on this lower end of the spectrum around a specific channel. It's potentially one journey. It's very transactional type relationships. Whereas on the right-hand side, you're looking at something that's very consumer-centric. It's really dependent on who is this person and what are they thinking about doing. So we're engaging based on what we think their intent's going to be. And that's really a value-based relationship, right? So how are we making sure that we're providing value to this customer with our brands, with our engagement, versus you know, just something like, hey, you are person A, you know, just do this, right? I just got this letter thing yesterday, and it just said, dear valued X, Y, and Z, right? There was no name, there was nothing. It was like, okay, I don't really care what this is. It's junk. So as we move from that perspective and the segment size perspective, you can see that the total number of people we're going to engage is going to change. Obviously, promotional messaging is going to be very big segment sizes, and then as you get to like next best actions, etc., your segment size goes down quite a bit. And if you layer in kind of some of the products that Salesforce provides, you know, here's some of the products that we have. Is this everything? No, there's a lot more products, and a lot of tools can do a lot of different things. But here's some that we've highlighted, right? So if you look at promotional messaging, things like the standard kind of Marketing Cloud connector between Service Core and Marketing Cloud, or if you're going to use something like Automation Studio to bring in some of that information from Commerce Cloud and then use that for segmentation. If you go to one-to-one personalized messaging, you've got similar tools that do the same thing, but you can now start to add things like Journey Builder and drive something a little bit more personalized through some of those emails, or Heroku if you're doing some of the segmentation ahead of time. And then you, and actually within that one-to-one, you can also do things like DMP, personalization builder as a way to drive even more personalized messaging. And then you jump into like real-time orchestration. You know, this is where things like, again, Interaction Studio, DMP come into play, and then you get to next best actions. You know, this is where we have tools like Interaction Studio. So a lot of these tools are available. They can be used within those same kind of use cases or maturity models. It's just, you know, this is how we're trying to categorize it right now. So let's start looking through the journey, all right? You think about kind of the overall unknown user to known user journey, and we go through the phases of awareness through acquisition, through to fulfillment and retention. There are different ways you can use the products across each of these different areas, right? So you think about the different tools, right? You've got something like DMP that you can really use in the front end of the cycle. You've got something like Interaction Studio that you can use both from an unknown user to a known user. And then the tools like, you know, the Marketing Cloud data extensions through Salesforce Service Cloud through the connector, etc., are all for known users typically. So this is where you're going to engage them once you have that. And this is kind of the combination of tools you would use as a way to drive from way early in the process down to something that you can convert a user into, and then focusing on very specific targeted once you know the actual end user. And really, as you think about those segments and how you're going to engage them, right? Marketing Cloud is really that tool for messaging channels. You would use those segments in the B2C commerce to drive the shopping experiences, and how would you personalize that overall storefront content. And within Service Cloud, you could do things like getting the one customer view, but also what are the next best actions? What are some of the promotions you can give them because you're part of this segment, right? Your service center becomes that, you know, profit center in some respect, in a way. And then obviously a lot of this stuff is connected together through the connectors itself between marketing, commerce, and service that we've already talked about through this webinar series. Continuing on into now diving a little bit deeper, you know, when you really think about delivering this unified customer experience, there's challenges. You think about segment management, right? Typically, we think about it in a very siloed operation. Hey, I got to segment these people, and then I got to go send them something. You know, and yeah, I'm going to do segmentation in Marketing Cloud. I'm going to do segmentation in a different place to then bring those segments in and do that work. Whereas what we're starting to see is that change of, you know, it's really meant to go across all three clouds. Each interaction within each cloud is then ultimately driving what specific segment you belong to, so you can engage at a more personalized level. So which really makes the segment calculations expensive, and you know, you need to start thinking about the amount of volume and things like that that's coming through to actually make that segmentation happen, right? We actually saw there was a challenge with a customer a few months back, where they had so much data, it took a long time to create these segments within the Marketing Cloud in that example, right? And we're going to talk about some of that, right? Best practices. You want to do some of those things like creating some of those pre-calculations and all of that in something like Heroku or some other tool that you're using to generate some of the segments to bring that information in. So all of this stuff is really important as you start to think about creating more personalized experiences. The journey complexity as a whole as well, right? How do we make sure that we're creating journeys that are more personalized, even more granular? So what does a journey look like? It can't be just, hey, I have this set of customers, go change this, do this. It needs to be thought through a little bit more. So you need to think about that journey creation process a lot more. And then also how much of, you know, quote unquote, real-time interactions we're going to bring in, right? Does it really need to be that real time? Can it be, you know, a few minutes late? And all of those different considerations also need to be thought through. And then having that consistency, right? As I said earlier, we need to make sure that there's consistency in terms of how we're engaging that. You know, if the product recommendation we show, you know, are they consistent with what they're typically shopping, what they're looking at, things like that. So let's, as we look at kind of the basic maturity model that we talked about, which is around the promotional messaging or just creating some basic, personalized type engagement. One of the use cases we briefly chatted about in the last webinar was you've got MC Connect, and Marketing Cloud Connect actually allows you to do some of that work. Gives you an option to create some of those segments across Sales and Service Cloud that you can then use into Marketing Cloud, right? So you can actually do that work, to do some of that work. As you think about that, you know, Derek, you're on the call. You covered this yesterday. Like, what are some of the key things that you see are typically like challenges, considerations around this that we can think about from a segmentation perspective?
Sure. So, so throughout the series here, we've talked a lot about data. We've talked a lot about how these systems all integrate. Data is the foundational piece for everything cross-cloud. And in this case, we again have to just keep in mind the role each different system plays in the process. So Marketing Cloud, the data that you bring in should be strictly meant for segmentation or personalization. The data that you're storing in Service Cloud should be around the customer master. What are those attributes of the human that we want to keep track of inside of Service Cloud? Each system has its own role to play in terms of that data storage. And I think that foundational piece, kind of the baseline understanding and focus on that helps you frame out what you're doing in terms of segmentation. There may be triggers for the segments that are built inside of Service Cloud. Key bits of data that help you. You know, with Marketing Cloud Connect, you can create segments through Report Builder inside of Service Cloud, which is great for non-technical resources. But there are much more sophisticated capabilities, obviously, within Marketing Cloud as kind of the segmentation engine, so to speak, of the current Salesforce platform. Other than things like Automation Studio, which you can write queries in to calculate whatever custom segments you want off of the data extensions coming from cross-cloud and third-party. You also can run filters on data extensions, again, more of a non-technical solution there for less sophisticated marketers. I'd add, from a segmentation standpoint, inside of Marketing Cloud, we do have Expression Builder and that's attached to the contact model that allows the WYSIWYG kind of drag and drop segmentation options. But it's usually helpful when you're talking about customer capabilities in a team structure. It's usually quite helpful to have somebody who's a technical marketer who can write SQL queries, because usually there's a level of nuance there that's not as easy to get to in terms of merging that data once you're in platform, except with Audience Builder, which we can talk about here in a minute.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point around the contact builder. So that makes sense. Yeah, the next piece really is the audience builder that we just briefly talked about, right? For customers that have made that investment in getting audience builder, there's a lot of things we need to kind of think through, because it now allows you to actually do some really cool things related to bringing commerce data, service data, and now you can really have a tool that a non-technical marketer, as you mentioned, Derek, could potentially use as a way to drive some of those segments, right? Like, can you give us some of the your thoughts on what are the nuances and things we need to think about for Audience Builder?
Yeah, Audience Builder is a fairly substantial commitment, I think, in terms of getting it up and running and getting it configured initially for the customer's needs. The really nice advantage of Audience Builder is it's a very sophisticated engine to drive segments and even anticipate what those segments look like before you create them, get a sense for how large the audience would be, and you can leverage all that data in combination, but it would require some customization up front. And then you should keep in mind that the data that feeds Audience Builder is a little bit stale, a little bit latent. I think it's about a 24-hour turn to get those data stores updated, which means that if you're looking for more of the real-time type segmentation options or near real-time segmentation options, then you might want to look to something like an MC Connect for cross-cloud, where you have Journey Builder triggers that can react to the record updates or creation inside of the sales or service org. But Audience Builder is a really powerful, souped up version of what you have in Contact Builder already, in terms of that ability to drill down and even include some custom attributes. One final thought again on data as it relates to Audience Builder, but more broadly against the Marketing Cloud in general, is data retention is something you really want to pay attention to. Marketing Cloud is known for creating massive amounts of data that other systems tend to struggle keeping up with. And as a result, we tend to do, for example, with Core Service and Sales Cloud, we tend to keep only recency snapshot of engagement data there, where we keep the permanent repository of engagement data inside of Marketing Cloud, just because of storage limits and other challenges you bump up against. Thinking about it from that standpoint, Marketing Cloud itself, of course, is also more performant if you're focusing the data that you bring in and keep to that type of data and that snapshot of data that you're actually going to be leveraging for that personalization or segmentation use cases, those use cases. So I think making sure you've got retention settings set up throughout is going to be very helpful to keep the system humming along nicely, and to make sure that your users aren't confused by the bulk of the data, or taking too long running queries against DEs that have records that are really stale and aren't really part of the current use case.
That's a really good point. One question I have around Audience Builder is, okay, so we have connectors that will bring data into Marketing Cloud. So through Service Cloud, we have Marketing Cloud Connect. Through Commerce Cloud, we have the Marketing Cloud Connector. We can bring order history, we can bring cases, we can bring all the information in. How would you actually get that information to Audience Builder?
Yeah, you'd have to set up dimensions or attributes inside the product that would help you point to the custom data that you're looking to leverage as part of the configuration. You can pull data from Marketing Cloud into it. It's an application. It's just a separate data store, which is why there's that latency that exists. But it is able to access the data that's inside of Marketing Cloud to help you build those out.
And then I think one of the key pieces there as well is that, customizing Audience Builder, right? If you want to start to create those specific segments, so to speak, requires that professional services engagement, right?
Yeah, there are constant enhancements to the product, but it's a good idea to. This is probably a good area also to talk through discovery. One of the key things we spend a lot of time in with the customers we engage with in cross-cloud use cases is around discovery, and a lot of times customers just want to have things just in case. And Audience Builder is a great ad hoc segmentation generation engine, kind of a just-in-case tool. It's really super powerful. It's capable of doing all of that. But I think the key here is that a lot of times, if you go in a little bit more depth on what the use cases actually are from the marketing standpoint, what the kinds of known segments, known groups, known attributes are, the just-in-case thing can get a little bit out of hand and quite heavy from an investment standpoint to configure, when realistically there are going to be only a handful of segments that the business is aware of needing to leverage. It's not meant to be a business intelligence analytics tool. It's really meant to be that segmentation engine that's really sophisticated, super powerful, but is does require that initial investment up front. It's going to pay off much more for you to spend time in discovery around the kinds of strategies and segmentation plans and targets that the customer has, and define kind of their level of maturity along that path initially, because you probably can do a lot of those things within Contact Builder specifically.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Really appreciate that insight. So I think I just want to quickly walk through just summarizing some of the key points, right? So really just thinking through that subscriber key strategy that Derek talked about earlier is really important. Keep those data sets tight, so that you're minimizing that processing or pre-processing within Marketing Cloud to make sure that the resources are used properly. And then you can actually start to think about the retention policy. How do you make sure that only the information that you really need for that customer is used, and that if you have data that's 5 years old, do you really need that, as an example? And then within that as well, right, like how do you make sure that you're looking at that transactional data again, less than a certain period, right? Typically you want to use a year at the most. At this time, we've covered 2 of these sections, or a couple of the key sections as part of the initial stuff. Are there any questions right now that folks have? If not, we'll continue on. But if there are any questions earlier on, I would like to make sure we spend some time answering questions.
I think Mihir, for now, let's just go on with the content, and I will connect a couple more questions for the next bit of Q&A.
Okay, that sounds good. So as we move to the next one, it's really around one-to-one personalized customer messaging. So as you think about those kinds of tools, what is it that we need to think through? At a very high level, when you think about something like segmentations, there's kind of the 3 layers of information that we think about, right? So you've got kind of the base segments that typically, especially within DMP, the way we think about it is you've got kind of this concept of a base segment that's representing a broad actionable population. And so it could be things like, site visitors that have visited this site in the last 30 days, so first-time buyers, things like that. And then you've got more of the inferred segments, which is, really specifically looking at, what kind of persona is logging in. Are they actually, the same as people that are my logged in users? Is there a specific time and type of user that's logging in a certain day and they transact a lot more, etc. So those are kinds of the reference and inferred segments that we're thinking about. Then ultimately, it's really the actionable or what are the persona segments that can really be used from internal perspective for research and then externally for campaigns, right? So this is really your, I am a auto enthusiast, I really love hiking, or I really love being an outdoors person, etc. All of that stuff are much easier from a persona perspective that we would segment. So as you think about this, really use this as kind of the key three frameworks as you start to think about how we're going to continue to segment and think about the users you're going to work with. Looking at DMP specifically, as we look at more of a one-to-one type engagement, there's things that we need to think about here, right? So DMP really solves the challenge of recognizing customers in that anonymous environment, right? DMP actually has a Crux ID. It's a unique identifier that actually persists across web properties. It persists across different devices. So it really allows you to start to collect that anonymous information about, so they know what you're doing. They don't know who you are, but at least they know what you're doing. And then you can actually use that, and we'll cover that use case briefly shortly here, how you actually drive some interesting segmented experiences based on that information. It also allows you to ingest first-party data. So it's the email's anonymized, but then that can also then give you the ability to create some of those segments and lookalikes and things like that. DMP also allows you to augment those segments with third-party paid media, which I'm sure you're all aware of, that can further enrich that overall experience that you're putting together. And then ultimately really sharing those segments with Marketing Cloud to create those highly personalized experiences. So I think this is where you can kind of think about how you can leverage them in Journey, personalize some of those interactions, the ads that you pass through from the perspective, all need to be kind of thought through, and you can start to create some pretty interesting use cases or experiences. But there's also this use case that DMP segments can actually be shared with B2C commerce to drive personalization. And we're going to spend a little bit of time on that specific use case. Derek, did you want to take kind of walk us through how this experience would work?
Sure. So so here, just to orient to the slide, we've got the DMP up on the right. We've got Marketing Cloud proper here on the bottom right, and then on the left-hand side, we've got B2C commerce. There are a few different connections here. It's actually a little overwhelming in terms of the number of arrows, but we've got this idea generally that the DMP is pulling in some first-party data from Marketing Cloud, for example, and third-party data from other systems. Also, first-party data from the DMP, the Crux tag. DMP is essentially trying to aggregate what we know about the human across all of the different domains, all the different sites, including the commerce site, the commerce shop. So when you implement, what you're trying to do here is essentially get the DMP segments that are generated based on your global internet usage. You're trying to get that global internet usage to shape the information, the offers, the messaging that gets presented inside of B2C commerce. Mm-hmm. And the way that works is essentially you're installing the Crux tag in the commerce shop, which is listening and also sharing back the matching segments for each individual human. So again, these are anonymous users. We don't know who these people are, but we do know a lot about what they are interested in, what they like, based on DMP's aggregate data it's been collecting from across the web. So when you put that tag on the site, it basically says, here's the current user that you're looking at. Here's what I know about that person. Here's their Crux ID. And here are the segments that they're actually interested in from a DMP segment design standpoint. What B2C Commerce does is it uses this segmentwatcher.js file to listen to the local storage that DMP's placed the segment IDs in. And then it leverages those segment IDs that are in DMP to help assign customers to customer groups, so anonymous browsers to customer groups. It's kind of an interesting workaround to handle anonymous personalization inside of Commerce Cloud. You don't have to worry about the fact that you don't know who this person is until they log in yet, because what we're actually doing here is listening for those segments that are generated by DMP, and then we've got logic built in the customer group interface inside of Commerce Cloud to map those segment IDs to specific customer groups. And then from there, you can leverage the customer group as a mechanism to push dynamic content to unknown commerce visitors, which is pretty cool. Normally that functionality is reserved for logged in known profiles, but in this case, it's also tracking against unknown. I should point out this is a session specific personalization. DMP's segments are capable of changing for every single human at any point in time. So Commerce doesn't store that value. It doesn't persist those session states across visits. It'll recalculate and regenerate based on the DMP's direction each time. Pulling it back into Marketing Cloud, other applications, we do have this collect.js. This is part of Personalization Builder inside of Marketing Cloud. This is how we can serve up Einstein recommendations in emails. If you've been around for a while, you've probably heard it called a few things. Personalization Builder is the current one, but collect.js is the mechanism that listens to the activity of the contact inside of the B2C commerce site and pushes that data into Marketing Cloud. You're building up profiles of what the person likes to click through, what they've added to the cart, what they've purchased, and it does actually bridge that gap between the anonymous user state and the known user state, whereas Commerce doesn't persist the session parameters associated with the customer group identification. Personalization Builder does. It actually stores the affinity and the customer interest based on their viewing habits through the website. It stores that as an anonymous profile, and it will actually convert that anonymous profile into a known profile once you've logged in and authenticated inside the site. And the great thing there is that once you've got the three things working together, you're essentially helping to bridge that gap of Commerce not knowing how to handle not logged in customers, but you still want the same kind of personalization that's available for something like Personalization Builder. And in this case, DMP kind of helps surface that up for us initially. There's a lot of stuff there, but does that pretty much cover it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, to me, the key things that I think about is, in our last webinar, we covered things like abandoned cart, and there's additional use cases with kind of how we connect commerce and marketing with like kind of the personalized recommendations and things like that, which are available as part of the solution kits. This to me kind of adds that next layer to it, right? Which is, I've got the ability, as a customer, I've got DMP, I've got Personalization Builder, I've got Commerce Cloud. I can now start to create an experience that is very differentiated. And typically we don't think about it from that perspective. When we chat about this, kind of gives that view that it is possible for us to actually create an experience that allows us to create a somewhat personalized experience for folks that are anonymous, not known by Commerce. And then if Commerce Cloud already knows you, or if you're using PI or collect.js as part of the overall Commerce site, you're starting to build out some additional data within Marketing Cloud Einstein or predictive intelligence to start collecting some of that behaviors, so that when you do want to, when that user becomes a known user, you actually have some history of that user. What are kind of things that they like. So you can start to drive some very interesting personalized recommendations through email, etc. Right. So I think it's a very interesting use case, at least for me.
Yeah, I'd add one other thing I'd add too here, just to give some context. The Personalization Builder application itself is able to serve up web recommendations, and some of our customers have used that for content recommendations in terms of news articles and that sort of thing. That certainly could solve some of these issues, some of these use cases, but the benefit of the DMP here and its integration is that you're pulling in, you're building segments for these people anonymous people based on their overall web experience. So it may be that their viewing habits on a sports website versus a news website are different. And the combination of those two profiles into a single segment or segments really adds some interesting capabilities there for personalizing the commerce site in a way that standalone personalization builder just can't do. It only focuses on the catalog of information that you've got and you've passed to it from the current site you're working with. Whereas DMP again is much more broadly accessing your overall web experiences, and that should make the segmentation options there, again through those customer group assignments, should make those much more relevant and much more impactful, I think, across the board.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so I think, thanks for that walkthrough, Derek. I think it's pretty cool. As you think about some, additional pieces there, right? So you are capturing those segments via the local storage, or you request segments via DMP. So I think the key piece here, as we mentioned, is it's a client-side activity. All right, segments are being written to the local storage, but they're also available if you wanted to. There's DMP REST services that are available that you can call in to say, hey, I've got this Crux ID. What does my segment look like? So you can do some of those things if you wanted to as well. I think you're requesting those updates. They're driven by the customer-driven segments, and really how you approach them is done at that customer session. I think that's a really important point that Derek brought up, is that we're talking about this at that session time itself. And then really the segment watcher really helps us kind of drive that customer group within Commerce Cloud to then ultimately use the customer groups within B2C commerce as a way to drive some of those personalized experiences. Ultimately, really what DMP is doing is creating DMP and Commerce Cloud together really creates the perception of that, I know you, or essentially the familiarity of that user. So really helps you identify and drive, potentially this use case for a little bit longer in terms of the overall cycle, because it's helping you scale some of that information, and really allows that personalization to occur, which you wouldn't have, as we talked about. So as we move on to kind of the next set of complexity, right? This is tools like Interaction Studio, and we're getting into kind of that overall really personalized engagement, really personalized one-to-one journeys. There's really 4 kind of key things or key pillars we think about within that. The design itself, right, which is essentially a journey builder, which is, hey, how am I going to do this? Where I'm going to go engage them, etc. The data, right? Interaction Studio is really going to be that collection point of all the data. So if you customize Interaction Studio, this is how you want to think about it. You're bringing all of the data through the different sources, web properties, mobile, chat, other anything really, right? You're bringing all of that information into point of sale if you wanted to. You can bring all of the data into Interaction Studio, and then Interaction Studio is really doing kind of the decisioning, which is, what is this? Who is this user? And it can really go from the unknown to the known user throughout their entire cycle as well. So kind of what we talked about with predictive intelligence, where it does it within that domain and what you're doing, Interaction Studio really is cool to take any of that information across all those different properties. It will keep track of everything that you've done, all the way from unknown, where you don't know anything about the user, to where that actually user becomes a known user. So it will do some of those things, and then it will drive, based on the rules that you set up within Interaction Studio, the appropriate kind of engagement. And that engagement is then the delivery of it, which could be done via a website. So this would be customizing the website, kind of like what we just talked about with DMP, but this would be a lot more a powerful experience. And this can be done, across, regardless of the session, essentially, right? So it allows you to go a little bit to the next level of engagement through the website, across both desktop and mobile, the call center experiences. So this could be things like next best actions, allows you to kind of drive and do some of those things. And same thing from a point of sale perspective, you have some of those experiences. And then if you're engaging the actual customer from a digital engagement perspective, you're also driving, or messaging perspective, you can drive more personalized emails, SMSs, push notifications within the app, or ads that you send. So it really allows you to drive a much more holistic one-to-one experience across all the different channels that a customer is going to engage in. So as you think about that, and you think about how Interaction Studio, Journey Builder, and DMP kind of fit together, this is a really good diagram that kind of walks through what that looks like. Right. So you think about DMP, you're actually doing the overall acquisition of stuff, of humans, as Derek likes to put them, into Interaction Studio, right? So you're collecting, you're seeing who the person is, and essentially you're starting to do that through DMP. Once you have all of the information in Interaction Studio, you're actually building out the overall control, the listening, the orchestration. All of that stuff is done through Interaction Studio. So you're going to put together all the pieces together, and then based on the rules that you've defined as part of Interaction Studio when you're implementing it, it will start to then engage that user through Journey Builder. So this would be things like journey mapping. You can send out specific messages, etc. I think the key thing here then is really that your rules that you set up in Interaction Studio is where you want to spend most of the time, right? And you really need to think through how you're going to set up those rules, what it's going to be used for, how are you going to use it, that discovery exercise that needs to happen so that you can create those right set of rules in Interaction Studio is a really big piece of the engagement when you're setting this up.
Here, I'd also add.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I'd also add on Interaction Studio, you really want to make sure that the customer's got a very mature understanding of their own customer's journey. To get to your point about discovery around setting it up, you really just want to make sure that it's not always the best fit for every engagement. If the customer doesn't have a good sense for what their customer journey looks like or what key touch points exist, and they're kind of still formulating that strategy, they may not be ready to leverage the capabilities that exist in it. So some of this is really around, I don't know if qualifying is the right word, but spending some time in that discovery to understand where they fit in that journey. Some industries, sometimes it's an industry specific thing where certain industries really understand customer behavior and what switches make the biggest impact, what buttons pressed make the biggest impact for individual contacts. But just figured I'd call that out as well as part of the discovery session.
Yeah, no, please. Awesome. This is really important. And then if you look at how then Interaction Studio would engage again with DMP, is really it's letting DMP know kind of what's happening, right? The saturation. This person's seen this ad 5 times, so you don't need to go send them another ad over here. So like it's really helping control kind of the overall experience that we're seeing across all the different properties, and then at the same time using the rules to engage that user. So now, if you think about from a cross-cloud perspective, I mean, obviously this is a cross-cloud webinar series. What does that really mean, right? So you're starting to build out this Interaction Studio tag across the different properties, right? So I would have a tag, say, in my Commerce Cloud site. I could have that tag in my point of sale, devices, right? If you have like devices, you can think about it from that perspective. You can have the IS tag in Service Cloud, so in terms of what's happening for that specific user. And then obviously if you have that a data lake or something like that, you can do that as well. Those IS tags are essentially constantly collecting information and it's sending into Interaction Studio. And then within Interaction Studio, with the rules, and the expression builder, etc., it's kind of building out the appropriate offers, right? So it has the entire capability of doing like offer management, what should be the right offers for this kind of a customer, and what you'd be doing at that individual one-to-one person level, right? It's not batching it up, it's actually at that specific person, human, essentially. And then if you think about kind of the next piece around that is the next best offer, and what should be that next best offer so that we can drive engagement, we can drive conversion for that specific user. And then once that calculation is done, it can go directly send this out, or you can actually start to then use Marketing Cloud as a way to drive those specific engagements right through the studios. So you can use email, mobile, etc., and Journey Builder to engage the customer as a whole. And then, as we talked about earlier with DMP, it kind of fits in with also then defining what should be that first-party data that you're sending to DMP to then ultimately create much better segments within DMP to then again target them for potentially upsell, cross-sell, or other services. That type of an audience globally across the different third-party web properties, etc. So it's a pretty powerful tool in terms of what you can do with it and how you actually use all the different clouds that we have to bring that information together as a way to segment and engage the end consumer. So let's go through kind of an example here, right? So I'm looking at a property over here, and I've got a very specific DMP segment that I already defined, and in this case it's bundle prod, and then I've got a segment ID and a crux ID. Now in this specific use case, I'm actually clicking this ad, and we've used in this example Rogers as one of the brands, for example, and I select on Rogers, the advertisement. Now they've put me onto the website. As I get to the website, what Interaction Studio is doing with that tag is starting to collect more information, right? So now I've got a ID that I've set up for that. So in this case, 45633. I've got an additional kind of segment ID and DMP information that I'm putting together. Now I start to look at some product bundles, and I'm building up that profile in terms of what we're doing. What is this user doing? What are the products that they're seeing? And in this case, now I've added things like affinity, right? They like the TV Plus bundle. They like the phone bundle, etc. And now if I'm a user, I've signed in, all of a sudden now I know who this person is, because now I have the contact ID from Service Cloud, as we've talked about in the past. And I can start to now say, oh, okay, well, this person already has so-and-so products from us already. So you're now starting to collect all of this information as an unknown user. And once you have the known user, you can start to associate all of those things. So now you have a much richer profile of what else do they like as a user, or as a consumer, as a human. And now, next time you go into another website, you can actually now start target them again through a different advertisement, which actually takes into account, oh, they liked the phone plus bundle before, so I want to go show them some additional information, right? So you're starting to kind of build a profile as this consumer and what they like, and starting to then retarget that advertisement and how you engage that through DMP. So just kind of walking through that entire flow shows how Interaction Studio would fit in across the board. So as we think about kind of the considerations for Interaction Studio, DMP, etc., you can import a lot of data from CRM, commerce, marketing into Interaction Studio. But it's important to make sure that you're not just doing everything, right? You don't want to bring in data that's going to change very frequently. You want to bring data that is consistent data, I guess I'll call it, right? It's not something that's going to change on a minute by minute basis or an hourly basis. Ideally, it's something that would potentially change on a daily basis, something like that. And then Interaction Studio can actually associate a customer across all those channels using email, phone ID, phone, etc., using that common Interaction Studio ID. Now, because we're using that ID across all the different properties for that specific consumer, now you're tracking that through that entire journey. And the rules defined in Interaction Studio are what drives that, right? So it's important to highlight here that the user definition here is done through those Interaction Studio IDs versus the Marketing Cloud subscriber keys, right? In terms of what you're doing with that. So it's really the key to help into all the different systems. And Interaction Studio itself controls the overall experience then, right? So and Journey Builder controls the flow in terms of how and what those messaging goes through. And then, with all the information that you have in the rules, then Einstein can actually provide the content. So that's kind of how we think about the overall picture. And then things like next best actions, etc., it's actually available through REST services. So if you wanted to use them in B2C commerce, you can actually bring that information in. If you're using Service Cloud as a Lightning component, you can actually use that as a way to drive next best actions from a service rep or a customer agent perspective as well. So it really allows you to kind of think about those consistent experiences across the different properties as well. That's kind of the key areas I wanted to cover today. You know, are there questions that we can help answer at this point?
Yeah, so thanks, Mihir, first of all. I think just going back to the DMP bit, one of the, or just like a bunch of questions revolved around how the people that are listening to this webinar, how they can interpret or imagine the sync between DMP and commerce, and how those groups, like those segments that you have in DMP and the customer groups that you're managing in commerce, as to how they interact with each other, and whether they are a copy or whether it's more like an interpretation, if that's the right word for it, or whether there's no connection at all. And I think Derek was presenting on that slide.
Sure, I can try and take that, and here feel free to jump in and clarify if anything.
I'll go to the slide. Yeah.
Sure. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, what the goal is really to understand what the interaction is with the data between DMP and Commerce Cloud. And to be completely clear, the data that DMP is passing is not being saved in the Commerce Cloud data model behind the scenes at all. There's no permanent repository storing segment IDs or any of that stuff inside of Commerce Cloud. There may be a use case where it makes sense to store the Crux ID for the individual contact against the customer profile in Commerce Cloud. And that might have more to do with kind of closing the loop back into Marketing Cloud down the road. But what we're talking about today specifically, consider DMP to be broadcasting out the unique identifier for the human that happens to be visiting the commerce site. So it sends the Crux ID, that's the unique user ID or human ID. And then it also sends along with that a payload that includes those segments that human has been mapped to within the DMP product. So, when you define your segments inside of DMP, they come with, you get segment IDs. Those segment IDs are passed over in like an array that the segment watcher.js JavaScript file will be listening to. The only data that's actually used inside of Commerce is that segment ID value set. And when you're configuring the customer groups inside of Commerce, you're saying, with a custom attribute where the segment ID equals the string, then you're going to put them in a certain customer group. So there's a linkage there, a hard-coded linkage there between the segment ID and the customer group that you're assigning someone to. But Commerce Cloud doesn't automatically learn anything about the human who's visiting through the Crux DMP tag. They're just getting that kind of, it's customizing the exterior rather than contributing to the data model directly. And in the other direction, there's nothing really that Commerce is sending to DMP that would make that round trip useful the next time. As I mentioned, it's a session variable that gets saved. So when your session ends and you come back again to the new Commerce site tomorrow, you're going to go through this process again where DMP is going to drop the segments for me specifically, and then the segment watcher processes are going to take it from local storage, and it's going to, as Abraham would say, decorate the site with the appropriate customer group driven content areas.
Cool.
I don't know if that answers the question, but hopefully it comes pretty close.
Yeah, it's clearer to me now. It's very good. Another question, Derek, while you're still here on this slide, I think two questions that I got pointed into the direction of whether you can share an actual example from your work where I think this is what you were talking about before you were wrapping up this slide. Is like when DMP data and commerce data comes together in Marketing Cloud to create an experience for a customer. Is there an example that you can share as how like a real life experience could look like? Or do you have a very cool example that you would like to share?
Yeah, Mihir, does one come to mind for you?
Sorry, I was on mute. As an actual customer story, I don't have an exact customer story in my head right now. I would have to find that out. But I think, I mean, if I think about it from an experience perspective, right? Like I think about it from the perspective of, if I have, I'm an unknown user. So let's say I shop at REI. I'm just making an example of, I shop at rei.com, and I typically, am a guest user at rei.com. I haven't created my username or be a member of REI, as an example. In this situation, to me, what's cool is that because we have both Crux and Collect.js or PI, with Crux, I'm able to actually drive something a little bit more personalized on that session when I'm looking at some of the product information. So as those customer categories change or customer groups change within Commerce Cloud, I can see content that's more valuable to me as a user. Collect.js in parallel is actually collecting that information to say, all right, I've got this person likes camping stuff, this person this meaning me, like camping or like hiking, etc. But I hate rock climbing, as an example. So in that example, I can then start to in that example, then I'm collecting that information ahead of time, because then when I say, all right, I'm going to go buy this thing from rei.com on the B2C commerce side, I am now creating a username. That username now is essentially, with Collect.js, I've started to collect that information already. I already have now some historical information because I visited the site like 10 times before I made a purchase. I've looked at many other things. I'm starting to realize what this person is, what they like. And the minute I set up my username or email with the email address, I now have a known entity in Marketing Cloud, in PI, that I can start to do something more interesting with. I don't have to wait another 30 days or things like that to drive, something more personalized to this user, because I've already seen they're hooked into many times into camping or with, with hiking, etc.
Yeah, and I think it helps to maybe make sure that, obviously people come in this discussion with a different lens based on their own experience and their own familiarity with platforms. The personalization builder, unknown to known user barrier is a very well tested capability. It's something that most customers use. Almost anyone who uses personalization builder is already leveraging that transition between unknown to known, and maintaining and preserving the affinity they have while we don't yet know who they are, converting that into the known state. The interesting thing about this example, and we do have a couple of in progress implementations that are leveraging this kind of mechanism with DMP specifically, but the interesting piece here is that while Personalization Builder can modify Commerce Cloud to make it show certain recommendations or make it show certain content blocks or content articles through the standard capabilities of the product, the interesting thing here is that what we're doing is leveraging DMP segments now and the capabilities inside of Commerce Cloud of customer groups, which haven't really been leveraged before for anonymous users. The biggest challenge in Commerce Cloud is how do you get to personalize the experience before the person logs in? And that's really what this is helping to address. You can think of it as almost two separate arm length transactions. The DMP into Commerce Cloud is helping to personalize the experience for non-logged in, unknown customers, anonymous customers. And the personalization builder on the back end is helping to build out that robust profile of what that individual likes, what their preferences are, and it will continue to preserve that over time for the more in-depth engagement at the end. DMP is kind of the initial part of the funnel, and so the interesting thing that Segment Watcher brings to the table is it helps make Commerce Cloud almost like a native ad service in that it can surface certain content specifically for the customers based on their DMP segment ID. So in total, I think the challenge we're coming up with is we could probably find an example of someone implementing the entire package, but the individual pieces themselves are not strictly speaking required to be integrated. You just would get the front end of the funnel versus the back end.
Excellent. I think this is very clear now. While we're talking about Segment Watcher, I got a technical question where segmentwatcher.js is actually coming from. Is that part of the B2C commerce package, or is it part of the connector?
No, it's part of the B2C commerce. It's not part of the connector.
Right. And it's I think it's part of the product recommendation feature.
Yeah, you know, Abraham couldn't make it today, so I'll have to check with Abraham to see exactly where you would get it from, if that's what you're looking at. That can be a question we can answer later.
Me here on the bits and pieces that you presented for Interaction Studio or Thunderhead.
Yeah.
The first question I get, or just a series of questions, were about how can we, or can you provide an example of how Interaction Studio can drive next best actions in B2C commerce? Or maybe you can expand a little bit on how a next best action would typically look like in the world of commerce.
Okay. I mean, really, actually, let me see if I have, let me see something, one sec, before I answer that question. I think the way, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the way this would work is that you would essentially call a service, right? So because I have all the customer information in Interaction Studio, in terms of who this person is, I have the ability to call that specific through the IS tag. I have the IS tag information of who this user is. I would call essentially the REST service that Interaction Studio has, which says, hey, who is, give me the next best action itself would be an API call through REST services that I can ask from Commerce Cloud to say, okay, what should be the next best action? Interaction Studio in itself builds out those next best actions, so it will provide me that as a result of what I should be doing. So it would be kind of defined through the REST service that Interaction Studio provides.
So if based on the data that Interaction Studio or Thunderhead has about a customer and potentially a product or a service that they can buy through B2C commerce can request a product, can request an action or a service, and then display that as part of a campaign, for example, or as a recommended product. Would that be an example?
Yeah, it would be. I mean, Interaction Studio has the APIs already. It's not like we're building API. The API exists, and you would essentially call that API from Commerce Cloud. So this would be the code that you put into Commerce Cloud to say, all right, over here, I would like to show this user the next best action. You would be looking at that REST API call that's made through Commerce Cloud and bring that information back into Commerce Cloud.
Taking this one step further, is there a connection between Interaction Studio and DMP so that potentially if you display an ad on the website, and I think that the question goes into the direction of if a Crux identifier is or a human is identified on a website that has a Crux ID, can the DMP make a decision based on Interaction Studio data to display a specific ad for a next best action?
Yeah, so I could chime in here a little bit.
Yeah.
I think the key is, whenever you're talking about DMP, the key is really to understand whether you're talking about first-party data or not. First-party data being the data that you have the right to use, and it's your data. And so, for example, you might be able to message those people if you've gotten their consent. Second-party data is really data you've collected from partner relationships. And then third party is the data that's aggregated across a variety of different systems. The third party, the second party data, you've got kind of limited capabilities in terms of your ability to market to them. The mechanism we talked about as far as DMP goes with the customer groups is really kind of the interesting way to get to get to that level, because we're not crossing that barrier of storing a profile, creating a profile for the human. We're just, the word Abraham likes to use is decorate. We're decorating the commerce site based on what we know about your interests. Interaction Studio really is intended to target individual users based on their website and in-app experiences, but it's really intended to target first-party data primarily, as that's the activity we'd like to, we have the ability to impact most easily. It can pull in signals from other systems, but the folks that you're actually, the humans are actually going to be shaping their journeys with are going to be known users for the most part.
Understood. Brilliant. I have one last question. I'm going to take the liberty of answering it myself. I had several questions on whether partners will get access to Interaction Studio, Thunderhead, and DMP as part of the partner agreement. And the answer is yes. So you can get access to a DMP sandbox and to a Thunderhead account, but you have to attend the official training that we're offering. So if you are interested in one of those training sessions, you can talk to your account representative at Salesforce that will help you through the process. If you've already attended a training, but you did not receive access, then you can work with me, or you can also work with your account representative, and we'll get you set up. Miha, just to confirm, I understand that we're done for the day when it comes to content.
Yeah.
Excellent. In that case, I'd like to wrap up. I'm not just going to wrap up this webinar. I am wrapping up the entire series. Gentlemen, it was a pleasure working with you. Thank you very much, Mihir and Derek, today for your awesome presentation. Thank you for everybody that was listening in. I hope to see you again soon in the next installment of one of our series. Please leave your questions in the partner community or in the internal boards. And hope to see you again very soon. Thank you very much.